personal views and opinions expressed by our podcast guests are their own and are not legal advice or official statements by their organizations. Hello, my name is Debbie Reynolds, and this is the Data Diva Talks Privacy podcast, where we discuss privacy issues with industry leaders around the world with information the businesses need to know right now. I have a stellar guest here on the show today. I am so happy and proud that she agreed to do this show. This is the Honorable Tanya R. Kennedy, who is the Associate Justice of the Appellate Division, First Department of the Supreme Court of New York. Hello, Justice Tanya Kennedy.
Good afternoon, Digital Diva, Debbie.
Well, I've been so thrilled to watch your career and the things that you've done. You've had so many different honors in your career, and just to watch you, ascend in your career, and then also have the privilege to see you speak on different topics at certain conferences and things has been a delight for me. I actually first encountered you. I actually knew who you were before, but I at first had been in a room with you in 2019 when I attended the ILTA conference in Florida. And you were one of the speakers that day. I was a speaker as well, but I think you were like the top speaker for that day. So you say the best for last. And I was really struck by your presence. You have a rare talent to be able to command attention without doing anything. So you really stood out in that room, even when you weren't speaking. And then when you were speaking, we were transfixed. We were hanging on every word that you said. So I'm so honored and thrilled that you're here with me today.
Well, Debbie, if I may, let me just say that I am just so impressed with you. And I thank you, number one, for reaching out to me via LinkedIn. And we are now connected through LinkedIn, and then invited me to speak on this podcast. Debbie, I am so impressed with you. And the reason why is because you are an African-American woman who is a superstar in this space. And there are not many of us who look like you. And so I've also been following you, Debbie. I believe it was in March that you were one of the panelists for the University of Florida e-discovery conference. Now, you know that when you usually appear on the various conferences, I send you a text just to say, job well done. I didn't do it, but you were just incredible. So I follow you. Since we've been connected, as you know, I have tuned in to the various programs, I should say virtual programs. And I just appreciate your knowledge, your creativity, and I'm just so proud of you. And let me just say that you are a role model for young girls and women to know that people like us can not only enter, but excel and advance in this area. I salute you. Digital Debbie Diva. You are a triple D threat.
Well, thank you so much for trying to make me cry on my program. Oh my goodness.
Don't do it. Order from the court.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Well,
your mother should be proud. Your mother should be proud.
Oh,
and your father. Your parents should be proud.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So much has changed now because of COVID and how much technology has had to help courts adjust to kind of the new reality. I would love your thoughts about how technology is changing things in courts as a result of COVID. Like, before we
Sure.
weren't doing as many remote depositions or hearings and things like that. So I love your perspective on that.
Well, let me say certainly that the courts had to adapt so quickly. This was something that the courts were not used to, but I think that the courts did an excellent job in converting under the circumstances. Let me say that virtual hearings are here to stay. This is my personal opinion. Certainly, when it comes to jury trials, we need to be in person. But there are certain proceedings, certain matters that can be handled virtually. For example, conferences, they can be handled virtually. Certain hearings, certain limited hearings, those can be done virtually as well. More efficient, less expensive. Certainly when we're talking about lawyers sitting time on end in a courtroom, the same thing goes for motions. These also can be done virtually, and I'm talking about oral arguments. Certain motions can also be done virtually as well. One concern that I have is this digital divide. We've seen this through COVID, and I'm talking about rural areas, persons of low income means. So this is an issue that we have to address. But I think that we are all the better for it, that we have transformed our residences into virtual courtrooms, offices, and we rose to the occasion. But certainly that's my take with respect to COVID-19 and technology. It's been very efficient.
Yeah. I'm glad that you touched on access to justice issues or the digital divide. It's such a huge problem, right? And maybe I'm mischaracterizing this, but I think as a result of some of these types of hearings or meetings being virtual, it may help to bridge that divide in some way. Because not all, like say someone who's indigent who couldn't physically come to court in some way, they could still participate in a hearing. What are your thoughts about that?
I totally agree, because there are some in our population that they may not be able to take off from work, as you indicated. So maybe
Right.
they can call in. And I'll just give you an example. In New York, I know that there is a partnership between the courts and certain centers of faith that serve as remote locations for persons to log in and participate. So I think this is a wonderful thing. And more areas across the nation can think about this, providing access to others to log in to the courts.
Right.
And let me also say, Debbie, if I may, that for me and other lawyers, we enjoy the courts, right? But then there are persons who feel so intimidated and perhaps participating virtually gives them more of a comfort, more of a sense of ease.
Right. I hadn't thought about that. That's a great point. That's a great point. So, because of so much now, because people are working from home, people are, more people are getting on the internet than before. We talked about the digital divide and some of that, especially as it related to children. Some kids before the pandemic didn't have a computer at home. So there were school districts that were rushing to get people computers or laptops so that they can actually participate in online learning and things like that. But as a result of all that, that opens up kind of more cybersecurity issues and also privacy issues about keeping things confidential and things like that. Have you seen or have you experienced those types of things as a result of people doing things more remotely?
I'm going to answer it this way. Certainly, I have not encountered that, and I'm assuming that you're talking about COVID right now or even before. I just want to make sure that I answer the question
Yeah, I'm
correctly.
talking about since COVID has happened
Okay,
and all the changes.
sure. I have not experienced that personally, and certainly I haven't presided over a case like that. But I will say this, because of the enhanced use of technology, right? It's imperative more than ever that not only the bench, but the bar and the general community certainly are more knowledgeable, you understand, about technology. And just as it relates to attorneys, when we're talking about competence, right? With respect to Model Rule 1.1, the Model Rules of Professional Conduct of the ABA, that certainly lawyers must have the requisite knowledge with respect to the benefits and the risks associated with relevant technology. And so certainly as we're moving away from brick and mortar, right, with respect to virtual offices, that will be even more imperative. And I know that the ABA had issued formal opinion 498 this past March 10th, to elaborate on the ethical rules as it relates to the virtual practice.
Right. Excellent. Well, I wanted
Yeah,
to shift a bit just about privacy.
sure.
Privacy touches all of us in some way, right? Professionally, personally. What are things that are concerning you now, either professionally or personally, related to privacy in the world?
Well, I, I, I don't mean to be sarcastic, but I don't think really there's any privacy anymore, Debbie. And hopefully, you will invite me back, so we can further, discuss this. But I think there's such an intrusion with respect to individual privacy. When we're talking about certain biometric measures, I'm kind of concerned about just this lack of privacy. But if we're talking about privacy and security, I think the issue is for all of us in our home, since we have been working remotely, and some people will continue that on some type of part-time basis, right? And that persons have been allowed to use personal equipment, their own equipment. It's really important that we have proper protocols in place when we're storing data certainly when we're transmitting data, we have to make sure that we have the proper security protocols in place. And I think that's really the issue. And that, once again, judges, attorneys, the staff have to ensure that everyone has the proper training with respect to this. How are you storing information, right? How are you protecting your software? Obviously, Zoom is here to stay, whether you like it or not. So, whether it's Zoom, whether
Right.
it's Microsoft Teams, right? How are you ensuring that those platforms are safe? And once again, when we're talking about transmitting documents, so I think that's really
Smart speakers, basically.
yeah. Let's say it that way. The smart speakers, right? And other listening enabled devices. Certainly, I have a concern with that personally. As I said, I just don't think there's any more privacy, but that's another podcast.
Absolutely, absolutely. I try not to invite surveillance into the house. So I don't use smart speakers or smart light bulbs, or I deactivated the smart features on my TVs because I don't, I can use a remote. I remember when we didn't have remotes. I was a remote, right? So it's fine for me to pick up the remote and use it as opposed to trying to talk to the TV.
And and I don't have it, and I don't have it here. And just, we all know, right, that pre-COVID-19, how there were various, breaches, in the course of the nation, just other industries, right? And, with respect to just ensuring that you are not using any unauthorized, programs or apps on court-related computers. And certainly, we've been trained, right, with respect to certain emails because of the various phishing that goes on. So it's about, educating yourself, educating the staff, because the bottom line is that technology is always changing, and you just have to be as up to date as possible.
Right.
And I think that has been one of the issues. This is just my humble opinion, right? When we're talking about, maybe some judges, maybe some lawyers, this fear of technology, you see?
Right. Absolutely.
Because there was a resistance. But the bottom line is that it's here to stay.
Absolutely. I'm actually happy about that because I used to be concerned about things where people were going, flying across country just to be in a hearing for 1 hour and then flying back. It just seems like there could have been a better way. So I'm glad to see that, the world will be hybrid, right? So we won't all be all the way at home all the time. We won't always all the way be in court or in the office all the time. So I think it's just a new hybrid world that we have to adjust to right now.
Oh, absolutely. And listen, and we've seen the legal profession change right before our eyes, right? And it will continue to do that. It will continue to evolve, and it's because of technology.
Right. Yeah. I want to touch on something a bit, and this is something I talk about a lot in my work, and it's kind of having being able to explain technology in courts. So the explainability of it. So as we're seeing, a lot of court matters now involve some element of technology in cases. So I watch very closely at cases where they have to explain as part of their case how certain technologies work, and to me that I'm concerned about it because I feel like if technologies aren't explained in the right ways, then lawyers or courts may make judgments based on something that's not correct. Or so I don't know. What are your thoughts about that?
Okay, I'm going to give you a part A and part B answer, if I
Okay.
can. So, the part A, we know about Rule 1.1. Lawyers have to be knowledgeable, right? And certainly, I know you talk a lot about, because I've heard you talk about e-discovery as well, right? And so the issue there is because a number of lawyers really don't understand technology. And if that's the case, then you should retain the appropriate expert to assist you in that, because that's when a lot of snafus happen because of the lack of knowledge. So it's incumbent upon attorneys to obtain the knowledge, right? Or have a expert to assist and then provide the court with that information. I also take the view that judges have to educate themselves. And Debbie, this is something that I continue to do. I've indicated that I, was basically new to this space. It was 2017 that I started to educate myself, and we have mutual friends in this space, but working with them. But it also requires judges to be proactive, to educate themselves on this area, right? Now,
Definitely.
Part B is totally something different. And let me just go back to A, and that judges and lawyers can work together. And Debbie, I don't know if you've seen me on other webinars where I've indicated that the lawyers should educate the judges. There are different bar associations, judicial associations, and certainly the attorneys can come before the associations to provide the information if they have it, right? Now, Part B. Part B is the general public, because many of the litigants are self-represented. And just because of finances, I think that you will see an increase in the number of persons appearing self-represented because of the lack of funds. Now, I am cautious about having court personnel explain technology. Now, I know that there are different court websites explaining to the general public about how to use certain platforms. I think that is appropriate because that's in furtherance of access to justice. But I think one way to deal with that issue, if we're talking about self-represented, perhaps there could be a bar association in conjunction with the court to sponsor a program for the benefit of the general public. But I would be hesitant in having a court employee indicate to a self-represented person what technology is. And I hope
Right.
that answers your question.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It absolutely does. So New
Mm-hmm.
York obviously is a leader in finance, so it did not surprise me that New York passed this New York Shield Act, which is a
Mm-hmm.
cybersecurity act to protect financial transactions of individuals. Did you have any thoughts about that act?
Well, you know what? I mean, I haven't had any cases, with it, and certainly, I think that it's a good thing. I know it's very expansive, and I think one issue is that once again, if we're talking about competence, you know, the attorneys are going to have to know this. But I think one issue is that you have so many different laws and regulations, and I know you talked about this, and there was, I think, an article in the Law Journal a couple of weeks ago about there should be a national standard rather than a hodgepodge of different state regulations. Have some uniformity in this area.
Right. I agree. Well, to me, the Shield Act is important. It's definitely important, obviously, because people look very closely at New York. Other states look at New York, especially around finance. But probably one of the most important things the Shield Act did was say that you have to, on a regular basis, have some type of check of your cybersecurity, you know, standing, what you're doing with data and stuff like that. So up before that, there really, although there were rules and regulations about what you would need to do after something would happen, I like the fact that the Shield Act is sort of calling out sort of those proactive steps. Like these are the things that you need to do to be secure just in general. And then obviously, if a breach should happen, they tell you what to do. But I really like that, the proactive part of that law.
Because it's really about, listen, okay, what is the risk assessment? Am I correct about that, Debbie? Because I mean, this is relatively new.
Absolutely right. It's like
right. I mean, and that's the emphasis of the act.
Absolutely, right. It's about prevention, and then what would happen if something should happen. So I think, prevention is much better than cure, in my opinion.
Right. So that's why I said I think it's a good thing because it's about risk assessment. So I think that's a good thing.
Yeah. And then, you had mentioned the thing about the difference between having a hodgepodge of state and local laws as opposed to having like a federal standard. What are your thoughts about that?
I think uniformity is always key because it provides guidance and clarity.
Right. Yeah, I think so. I think I would love to see some uniformity. I just think it would be hard to get consensus on a lot of stuff. But I think, my opinion is, all 50 states have data breach notification laws. And if we can unify that across the US, that would be a huge step because right now, state to state is different in terms of what how you define what a breach is, what are the reporting requirements. So being able to harmonize that, I think will make things so much better, as a first best step, and then maybe build upon that.
I agree with you.
Yeah. Well, hopefully other people agree with me too.
To be determined.
Yes, exactly. As we're seeing, as we're seeing all these regulations going around the world, and as different places are enacting them, I'm seeing, these new laws are being enacted. They're kind of cherry picking certain things from other laws, which in some ways is good because it sort of has a thread between these laws that have similarities, but there are also a lot of differences between these laws. I don't necessarily see that as stopping right now. I think the states are pushing ahead with passing new laws, and in some ways, I feel like on a state level, some states want to be different than other people, so it's not to be congruent, but to stand out in some ways. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
This is something I tell you that I haven't really given much thought of, but once again, I think that each state has to address its particular concerns as it relates to its residents. But as I said, I just think that it would really help and clarify if there was just one standard.
I would love that. That would be great. Pray that that
But we
happens.
shall
Definitely.
see. We shall see. We shall see.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, what are the challenges do you see in the future that maybe people aren't talking about as it relates to privacy that we need to really be thinking about, in your opinion?
Hmm. You're gonna make me think about this one, huh?
Well, I can tell you
You
what I
know,
think.
okay, okay.
I'm concerned about connected devices, like these Internet of Thing devices. As technology gets more sophisticated, these things can track and log and catalog a lot of information about individuals that may not be evident to the individual. We're not sure how that data is being used. I think that's my concern.
So I'll add to that, and this is going to be part two of our conversation, Debbie. Right when you invite me back, or if I invite myself back, right? Is this whole thing about there really is no privacy, but then coupled with that is there's new technology every day, and the law can't keep up with it. So there's always going to be a gap. You understand,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
The new technology uh, and the laws, because we can't keep up.
Yeah, that's true. Where
And
where
then once again, laid over that, Debbie, right?
mhm,
Layered over that,
mhm.
because if there's an issue now, and there is, with competence, that will even exacerbate the issue, right?
Absolutely.
With competence. I think that's my answer.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then, ethics is in there too, right?
Oh, obviously, well, that's what I talked about, 1.1, but there are other things as well to ensure that, that the information remains confidential, right? You have issues regarding supervision with respect to attorneys and other professional staff to ensure that they guide themselves accordingly. And then you have vendors. So that's another layer as well to ensure that information, I should say confidential information, remains so.
Right.
And then the supervision of those in your employ.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And then when we talk about the privacy that you said, just to make sure, that confidential information isn't being used.
That's right. Absolutely. Right.
Or I should say, not used, but, being disseminated. That's the better
Disseminated.
word.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. I always tell people that if you're working on confidential information, that I don't recommend that you have smart speakers in the room. So smart assistants, I don't think is a good idea, because when you're speaking with those speakers, your information isn't confidential anymore in that regard. So I have friends that they make sure in their workspaces they don't have those speakers around.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if it was Justice Kennedy, if it was the world according to you and we did everything that you said, what would be your wish for privacy, either in New York, in the US, around the world? Like, what would you want people to know about privacy? What would be your wish?
What would be my wish? You know, technology really is our friend, but it it can also be our foe. And I've alluded to this before. Just my issue that really there is no more privacy, and I wish that things could go back to a certain point of time when we didn't have these concerns. But I know that that is really unrealistic. So
Yeah.
I think that I'll answer it this way. it's all about knowledge, because what do they say? Knowledge is power. And so it's important that we all educate ourselves so that we can, have the power as it relates to avoiding data breaches and the like. So that's my answer. And that we all have to work together to educate ourselves and each other.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think education is key. The technology is not going away. It's not stopping. It's becoming more advanced. So the more we're educated, the better I think we can all be. I don't know. I think one thing that I miss that I think people don't have now that we had growing up was anonymity. Like, I miss that. So I'm
That's
sort
why I
of
said I wish
sad.
we can go back, but it's not going to happen.
I'm
So
sad
I
that
said,
people
okay,
growing up.
I'll give you another answer. So we're on the same page, Debbie, but it's not happening. So I'm thinking, okay, since it's here to stay, then what? Education. Education is power.
I agree. I agree with that. I agree wholeheartedly. Well, thank you so much, Justice Kennedy. It was such an honor to have you on the show, and you're such a delight to speak with, and I love to hear you speak about almost anything. So I'm happy to have you on the call anytime.
Well, thank you. And let me say once again, I was so honored. I've enjoyed this time. I told you I'm coming to Chicago, and we must meet in person. And you have to let me know when you're coming to New York. Now, I'll tell you, judges are not biased, but I'm biased about two things. One is my high school. I told you New York is the best place, but there are a lot of close seconds. And one of those close seconds is Chicago.
Absolutely, absolutely. I love to meet you in New York and see you in Chicago. That would be amazing.
Oh, it's been wonderful.
Well, thank you so much, and we'll talk again soon.
Wonderful. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.